Page 303 here. Let's start off the top paragraph. Well, let's just start off the very top of the page. Job 4:7. We'll just do a little review here. Therefore, submit yourselves to Yahweh, resist the devil, and she will flee from you. Notice that. You have that authority and power from Yahweh, okay, that you can resist the adversary, okay? So it's not impossible to resist Satan. Satan has all the power and authority to deceive the world, but you have the power to resist her. Isn't that something? Job 1 verse 12 says, blessed is the man who endures temptations. Now notice here, we just said that you can submit yourselves to Yahweh. You can resist the devil, she will flee from you. So blessed is the man who endures temptation, for when he has been proved, he will receive the crown of life which Yahweh has promised to those who love him. Okay? But notice, it's only those who endure, those who have proven themselves, these are the ones who will receive the promise. Now, millions of people have not had the opportunity to prove their love to Yahweh. Millions, actually billions of people. But we had that opportunity, okay? We had the opportunity to prove ourselves to Yahweh, okay? To prove our love. Millions have never seen the light of day. Millions in this world have remained deceived and never being drawn to salvation by Yahweh. Notice that, never being drawn to salvation by Yahweh. Remember, not everyone has that opportunity. Not everyone has been given that blessing of being able to come to know Yahweh. Okay, remember, he called us out. He knew us before we were ever born. And we were in his plan to be called out at a certain time period in our lives. And you remember what Yeshua said here. Yeshua said this is Matthew 6 verse 44, no man can come to me unless the Father who has sent me draws him, and I will establish him as a priest in the last days. Now notice, Yahweh has promised to give to us a position as a priest in his priesthood. But notice also that no one can come to Yahweh unless Yahweh draws them. Yahweh has to draw that person. He has to invite that person. Then we see again where Yeshua said in in Yochanan 6, verse 63, it is the spirit that gives life and the flesh is useless, right? Because Yahweh is spirit, and as it says, the laws that I speak to you, they are spirit and they are life everlasting. So we have to live by those laws because it's those laws that's going to keep us alive. But notice as it continues on here, he says, there are some of you who do not believe, because Yeshua knew from the beginning those who didn't believe and those who would betray him, because he knew through their works. Remember, by their fruits you would judge them and you would know them. But verse 65, and he said, this is why I said to you that no one can come to me unless the Father has granted him that opportunity. Okay? So Yahweh has to grant that opportunity to us in order for us to be able to know him and to be able to come to him and have that understanding. So don't ever take that for granted. It's not something to take lightly. So as we see here, millions in this world remain deceived, never being drawn to salvation by Yahweh, never having their minds opened. Okay? They will never have their minds opened while this current government goes on. It's not until Yeshua comes and Yahweh's government is set up that their minds will actually be opened at that time. But you were in that plan. So if you remember these things, it'll help you day by day to think about it. Millions more will live through the millennial reign of peace without Satan being present to tempt them. And please note now that Satan will not be allowed to deceive the world throughout this millennial reign, but she will be loosed again at the end of it. But during this time, this 1,000 years, there will be peace. Satan will not be able to tempt the people. Revelations 20, verse 2 and 3. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and bound her 1,000 years, and cast her into the bottomless pit, and shut her up. And he set a seal upon her, that she should deceive the nations no more, until the 1,000 years should be finished. And after that, she will be loose for a little season. So this shows the great love of Yahweh, that at this time, Satan will be bound and the minds of the people will be open. Right now, the minds of the people are not open. Right now, the minds of the people are blinded. Satan has their minds blinded. And it's all according to Yahweh's plan. You have been called out of this world. You have been called out, pulled away from Satan and given back unto Yahweh. Okay? So that you have a mind of understanding. Now, this is the purpose of the millennial reign here. The purpose of this 1,000-year reign that Yahweh is going to have is the time when Satan is chained, but it's not a time of judgment, remember. People are not being judged. Just like the world is not being judged at this time, they're not going to be judged in the time of the millennial either. Okay? At this time, the whole world is deceived. Okay? So their minds are blinded. So they can't be judged. How can they? They can't make a decision between what's right and what's wrong. They don't know what's lawful and what's unlawful. So they're not being judged at this time. During the time of the millennial reign of Yahweh, of Yeshua, when Yahweh's government is set up, the laws of Yahweh will be kept. Everybody on the face of this earth will be keeping those laws, but they still won't be judged. Okay? They can't be. You can't be judged unless you're given the opportunity to be tempted by Satan. To have a mind of understanding and then be tempted by Satan. Okay? And so that's why Satan is going to be loosed at the end of the 1,000 years, so that she can go forth and tempt the nations, and then the people will be facing the same thing that we're going through right now. Everybody who has ever lived, who will be resurrected on the face of this earth, will go through the same thing that you're going through right now. Knowing Yahweh, having to be able to make the choice between what's right and what's wrong, and having Satan tempt you to try and pull you away. Now, notice it says this 1,000 years is a time of rebuilding the earth to its original beauty, and is also a time to teach mankind what it's like to live in a world governed by the every word of Yahweh. Not by man's way, but the fair and righteous ways of Yahweh. And notice, it's 1,000 years of rebuilding the earth. Because if you remember, the prophets are very plain in what they tell you in Yael 2. I'm kind of slow up there. Yael 2, okay, in verse 2 it says, it would talk about the day of Yahweh. It says it would be a day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, like the morning clouds spread upon the waters, a great people and a strong. This is talking about the mighty armies and stuff that's going to go through. And there has never been the like, nor will there be after it, into the world, into the years of many generations. Now, if you remember Revelation talks about the two great armies, it talks like it's millions, 2 million millions, and so forth, but it's really talking about two great armies that's going to come to pass. And a fire devours in front of them, notice. And behind them, a flame burns. This is going to be those thermonuclear weapons. The land will be like the Garden of Eden in front of them, but notice, behind them, a desolate wilderness. And yes, nothing will escape them. Nothing's going to escape this world. When these wars, the final wars, break out, that's it. I'm sure you heard in the news about North Korea, the things that's going on there in North Korea, okay? They just made, and it was verified, that they now have a hydrogen bomb. Well, a hydrogen bomb is a thermonuclear weapon, okay? It's not just nuclear, it's thermonuclear, which means they produce much greater amounts of heat and destruction. Now, President Trump was asked, what are you going to do? Are you going to attack? And he says, you'll see. You'll see. That's what he told the reporters. It was just about an hour or so ago, it was reported that the U.S. will now take military action. Or now they won't rule out military thermal. Actually, they said that they won't rule out using nuclear Where was it at? Anyway, they said what they said was, the headlines was that the U.S. would not rule out using nuclear weapons against North Korea. Okay, so these things are building up. Remember, it's all in the fourth part of the earth, as all of this is prophesied to take place. So, as Yisrayl said, it's going to be like a Garden of Eden in front of everybody, but behind it's going to be nothing but black ash, because it's just going to go through the entire earth and destroying everything because of these nuclear weapons. And then when you remember what 2 Kefa says about, the heavens will melt, the elements will melt with fervent heat. The oxygen and hydrogen and oxygen will just begin to break apart and just burn and everything. You can see that when the prophets say that you're going to walk on the ashes of the wicked, you can see how it's going to take place. All you have to do is believe what the prophet's spoken. And Yeshua said, you're a fool if you don't. And anybody who would doubt that is a fool, because of what Yahweh says has always come to pass and always will come to pass. Okay? So believe it. Mankind has resisted the laws of Yahweh for almost 6,000 years now. And although Yahweh has sent prophet after prophet to warn mankind of the results of breaking Yahweh's laws, mankind has persisted in disobedience to the way of Yahweh. Due to mankind's disobedience today, we have over 50 wars raging on this planet at this very moment. 50 wars raging on this planet. In 2015, the number of ongoing conflicts increased. Now, some people may think, it's gone down. Well, when you look at the graphs and so forth, the statistics, sometimes it's going down, it's going up and so forth. But in 2015, the number of ongoing conflicts increased to 50 compared to 41 in 2014. And that was by the Institute of Economics and Peace. Okay? So even though this book was written, way back in the 80s, it's still current. It's still the same thing. You can have over 50 raging wars on this planet. Now that's just the number of ongoing conflicts. That really doesn't even include everything, because they don't always they don't count everything that's going on as war and so forth. You have to have so many deaths and all this kind of stuff. But everything that Yahweh told Cain is taking place everywhere upon the whole earth. Well, due to mankind's disobedience today, we have incurable diseases sweeping the world. Incurable diseases. Here's something, I forgot where I got this from, but it says infectious diseases kill over 17 million people a year. The World Health Organization warns of global crisis. Nearly 50,000 men, women, and children are dying every day from infectious disease. Many of these diseases could be prevented or cured for as little as $1 per head. Now, $1 per head, okay? That's something that they know. That if everybody in the world would you be willing to give just $1 in your entire life right now? Just $1? If the greed in this world wasn't so great, and those who could afford it could give $1, that would be enough money to prevent starvation through the entire earth. They've proven it. They know it. And they've made that known. But people won't do it. And of course governments hoard the food supplies and everything else, but we could wipe it out. That's simple, $1. So many of these diseases could be prevented or cured for as little as $1 per head, the World Health Organization says in the World Health Report 1996. At least 30 new diseases have emerged in the last 20 years, and now together threatens the health of hundreds of millions of people. For many of these diseases, there is no treatment, there is no cure, there are no vaccines. We are standing on the brink of a global crisis in infectious diseases. No country is safe from them. No country can any longer afford to ignore their threat. The Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Hiroshi Nagajima, says in the report. So they know. They know that, this world is coming down, and they know that they cannot do anything to save the people. They know that this health crisis is taking place upon this earth. And like it says, it's global. It's throughout the whole earth. It's no longer the little old poor countries, third world countries and so forth that are having problems. It's affecting everybody, affecting all society here on earth. So due to man's disobedience today, and also throughout mankind's history, we have experienced all kinds of suffering in every nation on this planet. Thousands of people are starving to death each year, as we just saw. And war and poverty killed thousands of others. The prophecies of your own Bible show this will grow continually worse until all hope of life on this planet is gone. All hope of life is gone. Think about that. Then, for 1,000 years, Yahweh will literally force mankind to live by the very laws mankind has resisted for the previous 6,000 years. Now, again, I want to stress the word force. It's not so much the fact that, like Yahweh's this mean old God where he just, forces, because you usually think about force as cruel force, upon somebody. But Webster's dictionary says the word force means strength or active power, vigor, might, energy that might be exerted, Energy, power, might. All of these things, remember what Yahweh says, is not by power, not by might, but by my spirit, right? That he is going to convert this world over, It also means that which causes an operation or moral effect, strength, energy, as the force of the mind, the will, or understanding, Just like Yahweh is going to work with the will of mankind, the mind of mankind, He's going to do this so that this moral power, as it says here as well, strength, the moral power to convince the mind. Remember, Satan's bound at this time, But this moral power will be convincing the minds of people. That's the force that Yahweh is going to have upon people. It also means virtue. It means validity. Power to bind or hold, The power to bind and hold those laws that they're going to be taught, because they're going to be taught to learn war no more, So these laws, this force that Yahweh will put upon them, the laws of Yahweh is going to bind them together. This is what binds us in love right now, right? This is why we're not fighting upon one another, So this same love of Yahweh is going to be upon this earth. And then its strength or power for war. Of course, they're going to learn war no more. It's also necessity, Now, strength for power for war, that's the way that the world looks upon it, right? You got to force yourself. You got to force peace upon nations, right? You go in and invade them to give them peace, right? But that's not the way what Yahweh looks upon it as. It's necessity, notice. Why? Because mankind would destroy himself. It's necessary that mankind be forced to keep the laws of Yahweh. And notice also its internal power, Internal power. It's the power of the mind. It's the power that Yahweh will give unto us, that you have knowledge, right? Knowledge is what? Power. So knowledge is power. Having the knowledge of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom, right? That's what Proverbs tells you. The beginning of wisdom is having knowledge. You have to know Yahweh. You have to know His laws, and then you can have the power and authority to bring forth peace to this earth. Now here's some obscure meanings. Obscure meanings of the word force is to lay stress on and to strive. Now you don't hear the word force being used as laying stress on something and to strive, right? But we strive. We must strive to make it through the narrow gate, right? And we lay stress on it. And that's what Yahweh's going to use. So the bottom line is, it's not force. It's not cruel and oppressive, but it's necessary to keep mankind alive. Do you understand that? Unless this whole world will be forced out of necessity, it will not remain alive. Mankind would kill themselves. And that's the whole lesson that Yahweh is trying to prove to mankind at this time. That's why He's going to allow nuclear war to take place. That's why He's going to allow the elements to melt with fervent heat. That's why He's going to allow the land to look like the Garden of Eden in front of us, but complete destruction behind once they go through. Once everything is wiped out. He has the power to protect us. And He's going to protect His people. He's going to protect the 2 billion. But He also has the power, remember, over life and over death. He has the power over creation. He has the power to resurrect life. So even though trillions of people have died, they're going to be resurrected. And we're going to have the authority and the power at that time to call forth the microbes wherever they are, however many people died, wherever they have died. You know, many of them live on the bottom of the ocean right now, as their ashes and the microbes of the dust, as they go back to dust, has been washed into the oceans and swept away. Some of them are up in the air, you know, as the microbes live up there and so forth. Wherever these are, they're scattered throughout all the earth, but we're going to have the power and authority to call them all back into one place. One place. Remember what Yahweh says in Deuteronomy 12 verse 5? There's only one place where my name is placed. Well, we're going to call forth the microbes, and they're going to come and they're going to enter and make forth this body. And then you're going to have the power to give life to that body. Remember, a body is a body. Just a body is not life. You have to give it life. Okay? And that's only through keeping Yahweh's laws, because that's the only thing that was going to keep us alive for eternity, is keeping Yahweh's laws. So this stress, this force is going to be through necessity to keep mankind alive, so that he won't destroy himself. Because if he didn't step in, remember the scripture says, Yahweh will step in and send Yeshua back. If he didn't, then mankind would destroy himself. He's that whacked out at this time. Only because Yahweh has allowed his mind to be that way. See, that's the love of Yahweh. Right now, Satan has all their minds blinded. But when the time comes, he's going to take Satan and bind Satan. And then he's going to open their minds. Because once Satan is bound for those 1,000 years, she can't tempt mankind. And so throughout those 1,000 years, people are going to live and die, but they're going to live and die enjoying life. See? And then, of course, they will be judged after that. Okay. So for 1,000 years, Yahweh will literally force mankind to live by the very laws that mankind has resisted for the previous 6,000 years. It is ironic that the very thing mankind, including Satan's preachers, have fought against for 6,000 years is the very thing that will bring peace, joy, and abundant living to the planet Earth during the millennial reign of 1,000 years. You know, they fight against the laws, but it's the laws themselves that eventually they're going to see. And you remember the prophet Jeremiah said that the time's going to come when people will say, our fathers have inherited nothing but lies. You know? And they're going to realize that
They've been taught lies. But when they see the laws of Yahweh and have the mind of understanding to really see the great beauty that there is in it and the joy that there is in it, then they're going to enjoy life. Now, during the 1,000 years, mankind would be forced to live by Yahweh's laws in order to prove to all generations what the effects of keeping Yahweh's laws will be. Yes, you know, when like I said, when you wake up in the morning, you're not going to have the option to go out and open up the freezer and pull out a slab of bacon like the world does now. You know, you won't have that option. The option you will have is open up the freezer and pull out a slab of nice bacon made of clean food, right? Clean animals. That's what you will have. And you'll receive the joy of it. Because remember, okay? Remember this. When you eat, that's a sacrifice to Yahweh. Okay? So Yahweh says to eat these foods. He's our creator. I mean, look, He created us. Doesn't He know what's great for us to eat? You know? But the world is blinded by Satan to where they eat just opposite of what Yahweh says. Okay? Because that's Satan's way. Satan wants mankind to destroy themselves. But Yahweh is the creator, made these things so that we can have something to eat and to enjoy eating. That's why it's such a pleasure to enjoy food that's been processed here in the house of Yahweh, you know. It's a great blessing that we have. But anything that we eat that is clean, you know, fruits, vegetables, all of these things that Yahweh made for us, you know, is a great blessing when we enjoy them. But at that time now, we don't even know what food tastes like. You know, we have no idea really what food tastes like. The majority of the food that you eat right now has molecules taken out of it, and then they reproduce these things in the lab, and then they inject it back into it. And that's what we eat. And that's why, you know, foods don't even have taste. Okay? But foods that are real tasty, that's because they've been enhanced, you know, most of the things. It's rare to find something that really has much taste to it now. I mean, some things still are that way. But even those things that do have nice taste is not really tasty. You know, it's nothing like it's going to be compared. When we bite into something, the taste buds are just going to go crazy. You know, I mean, it's going to be so phenomenal when you taste something that your mouth is just going to burst open with flavor, and it's just like it's going to be multiplied millions of times what it is now, where you're really going to truly enjoy something. You know, and think about this too. There's so many different millions of different species of foods. You could eat different food every single day. And once this 1,000 years is over, you still won't have tasted everything that Yahweh's created. There's that many different types of foods, of edible things that are out there right now. But of course, right now, in in different cultures and different parts of the earth, you only eat there's only certain things that we know of and so forth. But there's so many different things that we haven't even gotten to taste yet. So all that is awaiting us. Okay, so starting with Yahweh's love feast of tabernacles, Yahweh will force all nations to come together into one place and celebrate His feast in joy. Yahweh will bring this about by first putting down the rebellion nations which actually send their armies against the kingdom of Yahweh. Now, the Feast of Tabernacles, that's the Feast of Booths, okay? The time when you gather together and you eat underneath the tabernacle, underneath the sukkahs, and you enjoy. You're supposed to be thinking about these things and enjoying life and thinking about all what the people before you have gone through so that you can have a mind of understanding today. In Zechariah 14, 1-6, it says, "Behold, the day of Yahweh comes, and your plunder will be divided in the midst of you. For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, and half of the city would go into captivity, but the remainder of the people will not be cut off from the city. Then Yahweh would go forth and fight against those nations as he fought in the day of battle. Now think about it. This is talking about Jerusalem. Okay, Jerusalem, this really brings a lot of comparison. Because when you think about Jerusalem, Jerusalem is supposed to be the city of peace, right? It's the city of peace. And where's it located? Why, in the Holy Land, right? The people still, these Bible believers still go and want to make a trip to the Holy Land, But it's not a holy place. We know what their holiness is. Their holiness is the Kadeshim, right? The Sodomites and so forth. That's what the word that they have taken to mean holy to them. Okay? That's the meaning of those words. So you can see the contrast that Yahweh has used. He's trying to show mankind, to teach him a lesson, that by following his own holiness, okay, that this is just bringing him destruction. It's not bringing him life. It's bringing him death. And of course, Jerusalem, it's not a city of peace. There is no peace, okay? But of course, the new Jerusalem, Yahweh Shema, that's where there'll be true peace, and that's where true peace will come from, So he goes on here and he says, in that day, his feet will stand upon the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two from the east to the west, making a very great valley, and half of the mountain will be moved towards the north, and half of it towards the south. And then you will flee through the valley. Now you remember, that's as well, that land is which will be, when the land is split, that will be a place where food can be grown and so forth. Then you will flee through the valley of the mountains, for the valley of the mountains will extend to Azel. Okay? Valley of the mountains, actually the Hebrew says my mountain. And when it says it will extend to Azel, that word actually means noble. So this is really a prophecy talking about the noble ones of Yahweh, the house of Yahweh and so forth, protection and so forth. Because actually the commentaries, when they there is no place named Azel, okay? Azal, whatever. There is no place. And they say, well, this must be a place that's going to be built, somewhere on the other side of the valley. It's going to come about one day. But it's really talking about noble. So there's a prophecy that's in there. But yes, you will flee, just as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, who was the king of Yada. There's not really much mentioned. There's really nothing in history really mentioned too much about this earthquake, but it had to be a pretty big earthquake for it to be mentioned here in the prophecies. And Yahweh my Father will come, and all the saints with him, notice. And it will come to pass in that day that it will not be light. Okay? Zechariah 14:12-13 says, and this will be the plague which Yahweh will strike all the peoples who have fought against Jerusalem. Of course, they make it look like Yahweh mean he's up there and he's just going to knock everybody down with this plague, throw a plague on them. Remember, he's going to allow this to come to pass to teach them a lesson. Okay? All those who fought against Jerusalem. Well, remember also Jerusalem means the priest who teaches peace too, right? So they're fighting against these laws that, as we just read before, it's how ironic it is that these laws that they've been fighting, mankind's been fighting for 6,000 years, is actually what's going to bring them peace. And they're actually enjoying life when they see these things. So their flesh, here's the plague, their flesh will consume away while they stand on their feet, and their eyes will consume away in their sockets, and their tongues will consume away in their mouths. And I think if you recall the news that was brought forth this Sabbath, you saw some of these things, didn't you? Of course, we also know that the result of nuclear radiation and so forth is also going to cause a lot of these problems and stuff too. So it's a combination of all these different things. In verse 13, and it will come to pass in that day, a great confusion from Yahweh will fall upon them. Well, it's not going to come, it's not Yahweh who's going to confuse the people, but it will come from him, just like Yeshua came from Yahweh, just like you come from Yahweh. just like Yisrayl Hawkins comes from Yahweh, Yahweh's going to permit this, okay? And of course the confusion will be from the unclean foods they eat, from the parasites that's in their mind, and all of the STDs and everything else, all of these things that are caused, this is what's going to cause this confusion. So this confusion is going to enter upon them, and each man will seize the hand of his neighbor, and the hand of one will be raised against the hand of the other. So mankind, the sinners, are actually going to destroy the sinners. Okay? This is what Yahweh is going to allow. This is how Yahweh fights for mankind. Okay? This is how he fights his battles and so forth. He's actually going to allow mankind, through their own confusion, to destroy themselves. So if the enemies are fighting against the enemies, they're not going to be concerned with the house of Yahweh. They're going to be trying to destroy one another. And this, of course, is how the protection of Yahweh will come about. But that confusion from the unclean foods, the parasites, the STDs, and all this will completely turn their minds completely away. Because in the mind, of course, the mind, the brain is an electrical system, okay? It works on electricity and so forth. And as these synapses are clicking off, billions and billions of times per second, and these electrical signals are going through your brain like wires, when these STDs come in, and when these parasites enter into the brain, and remember they used to think that, they never passes the brain-blood barrier. But now they know that it does. These parasites will cross that blood-brain barrier and get into the brain itself. And it's just like mad cow disease and these things and stuff. When it goes in and it begins to affect the pathways, these neural pathways where these electrical signals are going on and off, it confuses the mind. And it begins to make a person not being able to think with a clear mind. And that's what Yahweh is protecting us from at this time. Okay, because if we feed ourselves with the laws of Yahweh, we're feeding on that food, and that food is what's going to keep our minds sharp and be thinking upon the laws of Yahweh, making the right choices and doing what we need to do in order to remain alive. And that's what we'll be doing throughout all eternity, making right choices and always be doing the right thing, always be righteous people. Okay, and that's what's going to keep us alive forever. It's going to keep all of the microorganisms in our body completely in line with one another. Because remember, Yahweh created them. And go back in Genesis and you see, every time it says Yahweh created this, Yahweh made this, Yahweh brought this forth, the very next thing you see is, and it was right. Right? It was right. Which means it was righteous. It was perfect the way that Yahweh made it. He's going to bring all of that back to perfection when the earth is recreated and when our bodies and minds are completely changed, and we'll be given, we'll be made into life-giving spirit. Okay? Just like Yahweh is. We'll be like Him. We'll be able to enjoy life to the fullest and have the power and authority that He shares, that He will share with us to be able to go throughout the universe, giving this to others, So now after this battle, Yahweh will force all the people still left alive of these nations to start keeping the love feast of tabernacles. In Zechariah 14, verses 16 through 19, it says, "Then it will come to pass that everyone who survives," notice, who survives of all the nations, these are the survivors, the 2 billion, survive of all the nations which came against Jerusalem, will also go up from year to year to worship Yahweh of hosts, by keeping the feast at the house of Yahweh. And it will be that if any of the families of the earth will come, again, families of the earth. Remember what Moshe said. He only dealt with one family, right? He only dealt with one family. The whole world is full of Israelites. They have taken over. And it will be that because that's all that Yahweh was dealing with, He said the Israelites would take over the entire earth. He told Abraham, he says, your children are going to be like the sands of the sea and as multiply as the stars of heaven. They're going to be multitudes of nations. That's what the name Abraham means, a father of multitude of nations. So they took over the whole earth. Because Israel means those who will rule as Yahweh. Okay? So remember, Yahweh's teaching mankind a lesson. He's letting him go his own way. But the time's going to come that when Satan is bound, now he will show them his way. He will show them how beautiful it is to rule the way that he rules. And then they will be given the opportunity to choose that way, or when Satan is loose, they will be given the opportunity to belong to Satan. And then, of course, they'll be destroyed and gotten out of the way. Because Yahweh is going to give them payment, okay? Remember, the wages of sin is death, okay? It's appointed to every man to die, the first death, okay? People will die. But as the scripture says, in these end times, not everybody will die, right? There will be those who will be left alive. But the wages of sin is death. Wages is payment. Yahweh just wants to know, what kind of paycheck do you want? He's going to sign it. He's going to sign it, and he's going to give you a paycheck. If you want eternal life and you work for eternal life, he's going to give you life. That's the gift of salvation. That's the gift of eternal life. But if you choose that that's not what you want, he's not going to force anybody. But if someone chooses that they want to go the way that Satan has, then he's going to allow them, because the payment of sin is death. And he's going to give them that. He's going to allow them to go that way if that's what they choose. So all the families, notice, all the families of the earth who will not come up to Jerusalem to worship Yahweh of hosts, then upon them there will be no rain. Now you will have that power. Now you will have the power to be able to cut off the rain. You have the power to tell the microbes, hold up, hold back. These people still haven't gotten it yet. They still don't understand that all blessings come from Yahweh. So we've got to teach them a lesson here. You're not going to do it to cause starvation and famine and death and destruction and so forth, to wipe these people out. You're just going to break their spirit down enough to where they can understand and say, "Whoa, wait a minute, we've got to trust in Yahweh. We've got to believe in Yahweh and understand that all this comes from Yahweh." And then they're going to be blessed. So it says, if the family of Egypt will not come up and present themselves, they will also have no water. They will receive the same plague with which Yahweh of hosts strikes the heathen, which will not come up to keep the feast at the house of Yahweh. This will be the punishment of Egypt, and the punishment of all nations that do not go up to keep the feast at the house of Yahweh. Now, that word punishment, okay? Again, so many different words are used in the King James Version and stuff that, punishment, you think, man, punishment is, I get the stick and I beat the crud out of somebody, right? They're going to be punished, right? But that word punishment, okay, it's number 2403, and it means an offense, okay, an offense, sometimes habitual sinfulness, and its penalty. So what it's saying here is that the penalty for their sin is going to be that the rain will be cut off. Okay? If they have that mindset to where they want to go that way, it's going to be cut off, so that they will turn around and realize, like, whoa, wait a minute. Yahweh is the one who gives all these things. Now, there's a reason for all of this, which we'll see in just a moment. But we see very clearly from the inspired writings of Zechariah that Yahweh will at this time actually force mankind to obey his laws. For the following 1,000 years, the keeping of Yahweh's laws will not be a matter of choice for mankind as it has been during the previous 6,000 years. Okay? But a nation cannot live and raise food to eat without rain. And at that time, Yahweh will simply not give his blessings of rainfall on the unjust as he does today. Now that's what it says in Matthew 5, verse 44 and 45. Yeshua said, "But I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you, and do well to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you might be sons, children of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise over the wicked and the righteous, and his sins reign upon the just and the unjust. But when mankind sees at the beginning of the 1,000-year reign of peace that the only way that he can receive the blessings of Yahweh is by obeying Yahweh's laws, then all the people will start obeying when they see the benefits obedience will bring to them. And they will obey also due to the fact that Satan will not be there to deceive them, because their minds will not be darkened at that time. Okay? And this shows the great love that Yahweh has for his creation. But notice, they will see. They will have to see. That's why Yeshua said, blessed. Blessed are those who see. Right? Is that what he said? He said, blessed are those who will believe without seeing. But these will have to see. Okay? Then they will receive the blessing. But Yahweh says, you're blessed when you believe without seeing, because you believe Yahweh. You believe that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. And the rewards will be given to you. So these will have to see the benefits, and then when they see the benefits, then of course they will receive them. So Yahweh is teaching mankind a lesson through everything that he does. Okay, everything that he does. It's just the way that the scriptures have been written, to where it looks like Yahweh is just this vengeful, mean person that's just going to go out and wipe out the armies and slaughter everybody, to where the blood's going to be up to the horse's bridle, it says, and so forth. And it just looks like he just wants to just wipe out mankind. Don't they have enough sense to know that he could have done that long before now? He could have wiped mankind out completely with the flood. He didn't have to save Noah. He didn't have to save anybody. He could have wiped mankind. He could have wiped out everything when Adam and Eve sinned. That could have been it. He could have just destroyed them and said, mankind, forget it. It won't exist. But no, it's all in his plan, you see. You've got to understand his plan. And that's why the scripture says it's written line upon line, precept upon precept. Here a little, there a little. And then you have to put it all together. But you have to believe it and to understand and believe the things that are written, that the prophets have written. Because the prophets wrote a little bit here, they wrote a little bit there. And you put all this together, and then you have a complete plan. And then you have the complete understanding of what Yahweh is talking about. And then you can understand why mankind has to go through this lesson. He has to be taught this lesson. There's no other way that Yahweh's plan could work, except that mankind has to go through this. Page 306 is justified here. Now Romans 2 verses 12 to 13 says, for as many have sinned without the law, they will also perish without the law. And as many as have sinned in the law, they will be judged by the law. Now the hearers, not the hearers of the law, are the righteous in the sight of Yahweh, but the doers of the law are the righteous. Okay, so you can't just hear, you have to do. And this is why these people, they will hear, they'll be told, okay, here's a Feast of Tabernacles. It's time to celebrate, join in with the great celebration of Yahweh. They'll be told all about it. They'll hear it. But some still will be hard-hearted and not going to do it. And of course, that's the ones who are going to suffer, and then they have to see, and then to see where the blessings come from. Then they'll have a change of mind. But the word translated justified here is number 1344 in Strong's. And notice it means to render or to show. I'll show you that. That word. Okay, the word justified. It means, okay, it's the word translated justified is number 1344 in Strong's, and it means to render, to show regard as just or innocent, or to be righteous. It comes from 1342, which means, notice, character. Character and actions is what Yahweh is looking for, right? By implication, being innocent and holy, just and righteous, okay? So it's through our characters, through our actions. This is the way that Yahweh is judging us and watching over us, and actually allowing us to be found acceptable in his eyes. So in effect, to be justified is having rendered or proven that one is just, one is innocent, one is righteous, or holy in action and character. Okay? Now it's recorded in Genesis 6 verse 9 that Noah was a just man, a just and an upright man. That word just in Genesis 6 verse 9 is number 6662, and it means just or lawful or righteous. Just, lawful, righteous. It comes from 6663, which means to make right in a moral sense, to cleanse, to do justice or justify oneself, to turn to righteousness. Okay, so this word means lawful and righteous. So Noah kept the laws of Yahweh, so he proved himself to be righteous to Yahweh. Now, the prophet Isaiah was inspired to write that our righteousness, okay, is as filthy rags. Okay, and that our iniquities is the breaking of Yahweh's laws. Real quick, I want to go to that. Isaiah 64. 64, verse 6. 64, verse 6. And since the beginning, not since the beginning, we're at verse 6 here. Okay, and we are all like one who is unclean, and all our, notice, our, okay? Circle the word our righteousness. Or as filthy rags, we are fade as a leaf, and our iniquities like the wind would take us away. And that word filthy rags is exactly what it is. It's filthy rags. It was a rag that was used for something. In Romans, notice he says our righteousness, okay? Our righteousness. In Romans 10, there it is. In Romans 10, it says, brothers, my heart's longing prayer to Yahweh for Israel is that they may be saved. For I can testify about them that they were zealous for Yahweh, but their zeal is not according to the knowledge. Okay, it's not according to the knowledge of Yahweh. They don't have the power and might of Yahweh. Since they, being ignorant of the righteousness that comes from Yahweh, and seeking to establish their own righteousness, have not submitted to Yahweh's righteousness. Okay? They want their own righteousness. They have their own laws. They think that they can do their own thing. Okay? So what then makes one righteous in the eyes of Yahweh, as Noah was proven to be? Well, the very same thing that Noah made Noah righteous in the eyes of Yahweh is the same thing that makes us righteous in Yahweh's eyes today, and that's obedience. Obedience to Yahweh's laws makes one righteous in Yahweh's sight. Now, forefather Abraham was obedient to Yahweh, as Genesis 26 verse 5 says, because he says he kept his laws, his statutes, his judgments, right? He was obedient to Yahweh's laws. So Abraham was justified. He proved to be righteous through his obedience. But our own obedience, okay, by our own obedience to Yahweh's just laws, we become just. We become righteous. He who practices righteousness is righteous, right? So we become righteous men and women and children. Now the prophet Yekeskel was inspired to write in Yekeskel 18 verse 5, he says, if a man is just by doing that which is lawful and right, okay, a man is just if he does that which is lawful and right. So being lawful and righteous by our total obedience to Yahweh's will is the only way that we can be just. Because one certainly does not become just by acting unlawful or doing that which is not right. Although Baal's preachers would like for you to think so. They would like for you to think so, right? They want you to think so. They want you to think that you're not under the law. You're not under the law, you're under grace. You're under grace. All you got to do is just do it grace, right? Remember what the scripture says, because the King James should have brought a King James, but the King James, with their grace thing, it says, this is Romans 6 verse 1, what shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that mercy and pardon may abound?
Actually, that word says grace. So that grace may abound. And then it says, by no means. Okay? When the King James, it says, what shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning so that grace may abound? God forbid. Okay? And then verse 15 really says the same thing too. But what may be sin, though we are not under the law, yet under Yahweh's undeserved pardon? By no means. There it says grace again. Shall we go on sinning? The King James says, shall we go on sinning so that grace may abound? By no means. You know? So there God tells them, don't even do that, you know. But notice, we're talking about Noah here. Look at Noah. Now, the King James uses grace in the Old Testament too. They say that Noah was saved by the grace of God. But in Genesis 6 verse 8, there we go. Genesis 6 verse 8, it says, Noah found regard and honor in the eyes of Yahweh. Okay? In the King James it says Noah was found grace in the eyes of God. Okay? But that word regard, okay, that word grace, it actually is number 2580, and it really means acceptance. Okay? It means to be accepted by Yahweh. That's what the word grace, that's what their word grace means, to be accepted by Yahweh. It comes from 2103, and it means to bend or to stoop in kindness to an inferior. And that's really what Yahweh does. You know, he bends down and he stoops down to us, his creatures, who are inferior to us. But the very ones who he says in Psalm 8 will have rulership over all things that he's created. Right? So he bends down to us and stoops down to us in service to us, so that we can be found acceptable to him. You get that? Yahweh serves us so that we can be found acceptable to him. Okay? That's why it says, here's my righteous laws. Practice these laws of righteousness and you will be righteous. Love doing that and you will be found holy in my eyes. Okay? And so you see the great love that Yahweh has, that he actually allows us to be found acceptable in his eyes. So that's really what that word grace, that they use grace, they have no idea. To them it's just like, you know, sin whatever you want, but, you know, just backslide. If you fall away from grace, you backslide, you know, and so forth. Once saved, always saved. But of course Yahweh says, not so. The soul that sins, it will die, he says. All right, we got to stop this time. Let's see, we're going to stop here on page 307 here, about the middle of the page that Gahan can take off through next week. May Yahweh bless you, man.